Hey guys, I'm Dr. Kori Propst, Wellness Director and Vice President of the Diet Doc, here with Dr. Joe Klemczewski, founder of the Diet Doc. Welcome back to the Diet Doc Life Mastery Podcast. We're in the Macro Mastery segment today, and we're going to discuss how to craft your magic macronutrient profile. And Joe, I know we're going to dig into the variables that are really important to begin considering when doing so.
Yeah. Those of you watching might say I have a new uniform on today.
I think we actually switched. Like, this is the shirt you usually wear.
I know. Good to see you wearing the logo there. But so almost a year, well, actually a little over a year ago, last November, we launched the Macro Doc, which is a calculator that once we kind of put it out there, we really don't talk about it that much. There were a lot of these calculators being created, and there were a lot of flaws, obviously. I mean, you're dealing with algorithmic type equations, and behind that, you have to have somebody who knows what they're doing to factor in that coding tree. So it took me and two coders a full year to develop our Macro Doc calculator. And there are still some things I want to fine tune. There are some things as you get out toward the ends of different extremes with body weight, body size goals that I want to adjust eventually and on an ongoing way. But the thing is, that much decision process, that much time that it took us, me and two coders to create this, that's what goes into, I think, a successful starting point for anybody. And Kori, as we were just talking about the podcast a little bit before we went on air, I said everybody has to know how much to eat, and whether you make that decision consciously or not, eventually you're stuck with those decisions every single day. Is this the right food I should be eating? Is this the right kind of food? Is this the best quality? How much of everything? And hence we have a lot of confusion in the world.
We sure do. And I think a lot of that is due to just the sheer amount of information that's being thrown at people about how to do it and what to expect. And I think one of the key words that you already mentioned, Joe, is adjustment. You're always going to have the outliers, that the extremes outside of the bell curve that require adjusting. But I think we need to look at that from the perspective of every single one of us is unique. There are some universal principles, but then those need some adaptation. And I'm excited to hear from you, what's involved in that.
Yeah, well, so you and I, again, we're just in Nashville for a new Diet Doc program owner training conference. And we always split it almost down the middle. We have a lot of business setup work to do. We have to talk about fitness entrepreneurship, but then we also have to sway hard into this is how we actually do this. This is how you become the best nutrition coach in the world. And so we spend some time digging right into calories and macronutrients and meal programming and all of that. And as soon as we got back, said goodbye to all of our new program owners and all of our current program owners who came, the very first question I received from one of our new peeps was, hey, how do I figure out macros? And so I had to say, well, remember we spent, a good amount of time doing that, but I also mentioned that I have dozens of articles and videos and podcasts on this topic. But I mean, I totally expect that. That's very natural, because when you get into the biochemistry and the science and the how-to behind successful diet planning, it's very technical, and it's overwhelming to some people.
Yeah, and I do think we need, like I said, we need some ground level principles or equations or fundamentals from which to begin with, and then we can look at the nuances.
Right. So I always think of it like this. No matter how much information you're going to try and include in your decision making, it has to start with total energy. So we're going to look at calories and how I consider that between genders and different types of bodies and genetics. But then we have to get into the macros, so protein, carbs, and fat. I don't think we'll have time today to scope entirely into meal planning and all that, but at least the macronutrient profile. So you've heard me talk about this quite a bit, Kori, that I think the best information out there that holds up well is that the average basal metabolic rate for the average male is about 1,650 to 1,700 calories. For women, about 1,350 to 400. And that's basal. So that doesn't include your training. That's just your non-exercise activity and plus your genetics, just from the time you're asleep to your normal, movement patterns. That's where we start. Then we have to factor in any additional intentional training and exercise. Right. Then we have to create the calorie deficit. So we're gonna add in calorie expenditure and then take back out the calorie deficit to meet a goal. If it is somebody's goal to lose body fat, then we have to separate it out into the percentages of protein, carbs, and fat. So let me go through just a little bit of a sample. Let's say I have a client. I'm thinking of one that I'll discuss in a few minutes, who is mid 40s, maybe even late 40s, and weighed about 125 or so pounds, maybe 130. And we ended up getting down close to 110 pounds. And so her initial calorie intake, if I looked at that basal metabolic rate of 1,350, and I said, okay, you're training pretty hard every day, at least an hour, pretty aggressively, let's factor in 400 or 500 calories. So now we got to scoot you back up into those upper teens, maybe 1,700, 1,800 calories. But we need to lose body fat. So now we've got to say, okay, if we want to lose a pound a week of body fat, that's about a 500 calorie a day deficit initially. So now we're kind of right back into that 1,350 range. And ironically, that's about where we started. So I remember, being around 130, 140 grams of protein, 150 or so grams of carbs, and as low as 25 to 30 grams of fat, as high as 50 grams of fat when we had gone through a little bit of metabolic building. So she was on the upswing of moving toward maintenance. So if you're ready, Kori, we'll kind of snip those apart by macronutrient.
Yeah, I think that's what everyone would like to hear as you're talking right now and thinking, how did you come up with those numbers, Joe? Yeah.
So if you know the RDA, 0.8 grams of protein per kilogram of body weight, for her, an RDA level of protein might be as low as 45-ish grams of protein a day.
And you have a woman who's training regularly and lifting weights and
training aggressively, losing body fat in a calorie deficit. So I trust the majority of science agencies that have all concluded that 2 times the RDA is more appropriate. So that gets us closer to 100 or so grams of protein for her. But I also know that 3 times the RDA has been studied by a handful of people in the exercise science industry. And academically, they found that for some people, some of the time, that's even effective, more effective than 2 times or 2.5 times. So not necessary, but it does give you a little bit of a cushion. And so for this particular client, we did move up, like I said, 120, 130. So we're at about 2.5 times the RDA. And that's pretty aggressive. But at the same time, think of this person not just by body weight dimension, but just as a human being. So whether she's 120 pounds, 130 pounds, or 170 pounds, would 125 or so grams of protein be a good amount for you, Kori?
That's how much I eat, Joe. I like that much. Lower than that, I'm not necessarily feeling as satisfied. 125 to 130 is easy for me to eat. I could eat a lot more, but I don't know that would be to my benefit.
So for you, 120, 125 grams of protein is essentially about 4 meals with a really good amount of protein.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So whether that's...
Go ahead.
Well, I was going to say whether that's a chicken breast or scoop of protein powder, it means that around 4, maybe even 4.5 meals a day have a center of protein.
Yes, every one of my meals has protein in it.
Okay. And that's not entirely necessary for, if I did want to pull her back, if I said, look, I really think we need to save room for carbs, and so I want to pull your protein back more towards 100, 110, so we're at 2 times the RDA, that would be acceptable. But I do think, her goal to increase or retain as much lean body mass as she can while dieting is important. I perceived her genetic body type to be a little bit ectomorphic. So, I know she is churning through calories at a little bit higher rate. She has a light frame, and she was able to lose body fat pretty quickly. It didn't come to me with a lot of body fat to begin with.
Did you have an idea, Joe, of what she was consuming before you calculated where you might actually put her in terms of macronutrient ranges?
Yeah, 100%. Whether you're doing this on your own or working with somebody, the first thing I would always ask is, let me see your actual nutrition right now. What are you eating? And then specifically, even, have you dieted in the past? Have you tried different methods of dieting? What did you accomplish? Do you have any records of that? Because we do have to make sure that we're on the same page with accuracy and objectivity. Mm-hmm. So I want to take that information. That's very important. So it's not just all analysis by me. If it's just right there in front of us, that's a pretty good piece of information.
Yeah, I'm thinking too, Joe, of the clients that have come on board for coaching with me, and they have just been given. I look at the ranges that other coaches have recommended they try to meet, and I'm like, I'm kind of blown away by the amount of food. And oftentimes it is protein where I'm thinking, could you even get that in every single day? How was that for you? And a lot of times I do hear, like, it was really hard for me to do. And I think we need to consider that. Is right. What we're going to be recommending something they're going to be able to sustain?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And as a matter of fact, as I'll touch on a little bit, I even increased her protein for a time when carbs were getting a little bit lower, but not much at all, and still within, a very easy range to hit. But once I have protein, needs scaled out, then I move right into that energy balance between carbs and fat. And, the evidence to me is so consequentially proven. There's no question at all that you're always going to lose body fat faster if you bring dietary fat lower and you elevate carbs. Dietary fat has almost no thermic effect, less than 3% thermic potential from dietary fat, yet carbohydrates are going to increase your metabolism. They're going to create a higher anabolic environment, so you're going to be able to retain lean body mass. Again, we've got tons of content on this. It's so well documented and proven. It's laughable that there's even a controversy. But for this particular client, like I said, I did bring dietary fat down to 25 or 30 grams, which is essentially about 20% or lower of her calories from fat. So as I'm calculating this out, I start with the presupposition calorically that what I just described as the average basal metabolic rate is real, which I find it to be extremely accurate. But the average means we're at that midpoint on a continuum. Somebody could be much lower, somebody could be much higher. I've worked with women who are hypothyroid, maybe have PCOS and other endocrine issues, and their basal metabolic rates may be under 1,000. I've worked with women who have basal metabolic rates over 2,500 calories. So, again, these are averages to start from, and then you have to interpret with your good deductive reasoning skills, what kind of body type shift you might need to include in your calories. So when I'm looking at those total calories, I'm already thinking in my mind of that carbohydrate and fat energy continuum, which side am I going to go on for people? Right. But I will always shoot for 20% or under. Once we've got protein out of the way, also by that RDA, very established research, taking the RDA with a multiplier times 1.5 or 2 or 3. Okay. But then when we're down to that fat, this is another place where I can rely on a formulaic reasoning that holds up. And like I said, if you get to 15 or 20% of your calories from fat, you still have enough to have a little bit of flexibility in your food. You don't have to say, well, I'm going to microwave egg whites because I don't want the 3 grams of fat in a grilled chicken breast. It's like, no, you can have the chicken breast. You don't have to say, well, white fish has less than, lean steak or something. No, you can have that, or salmon. So I want to make room for good, healthy fat choices, but we don't have to have fat high. A lot of people mistakenly think, oh, you got to have fat high for hormones and testosterone. You got a lot of body fat on your body that you're trying to lose. You have enough fat for cholesterol-derived hormones. You just don't need that. What protects your lean body mass is your body composition first, and then your total calorie level second. Fat intake is way after the fact.
Yeah, I have a lot of clients who, when I first start working with them, Joe, are adding fat into every meal. So they've subscribed to protein, carbs, and fat every meal. Need to add it in, whether it's with some type of oil or avocado or cheese. It's an extra food item that they're putting in there. And I agree with you that if we can dispel the myth that that even needs to happen, and just get them to be eating leaner protein choices, but that, many of those they just naturally have fat in them. It makes it a lot easier to be within that 15 to 20% range.
Right. And here, ironically, the exact client I'm talking about was in the gym the other day. And we're now in a short, abbreviated off season because she wants to compete in the spring. So we're not looking to add any body fat whatsoever. Just raise her macronutrients up, go through that metabolic building phase that I talk about all the time. And so her fat intake, dietary fat, is up to 50 grams, which at her current calorie intake is 26% of her calories. And again, and to me, that's getting moderate. When you get up to 30% or so, which I consider a pretty high ceiling for an off season, somebody who's not gaining or not trying to lose body fat, somebody who's just trying to maintain, you get up to 30% of your calories from fat. That's work. I mean, you have to be trying to eat a lot of fat.
Yeah.
And a trainer came up to her in the gym, asked her what she was eating, and she said, only 50 grams of fat. You need a ton more than that, and went right to the hormones. And I'm partially to blame for this. In the very first book I ever wrote, like 15 years ago, I talked in my fat chapter about the importance of fat for that. And I did not talk about the context well enough. So there are a lot of people who were reading my initial information back then. And I'm sure it's around too. I know the keto people talk about it as well. Like you just have to have that fat. But
these people are just getting stuck on a number. We don't even have a context. So to look at someone, hear the number, and automatically assume that they're not getting enough, it's very ignorant.
And that's the greatest point right there, Kori. This particular client of mine was smart and confident enough to say, 50 grams of fat is plenty. And besides, do you know who my coach is? And then she's like, dropped my name and walked away. But then other trainers actually came up to her and apologized. They're like, wow, I mean, are you kidding me? I don't know why she did that to you. So sorry. I mean, look at you. You look better than she does. Obviously, you know what you're doing. But it is exactly like you said. You almost get into this tribal mentality of it doesn't fit my superficial little micro understanding that doesn't come from any extensive knowledge. It's just a number, and now I'm going to lash out and tell somebody they're wrong.
Right.
So, very unfortunate. But once you have that established, what you're going to do with your fat intake, then the balance can come from carbohydrates. So I look at carbs. I always want carbs to be as high as possible. So I'm going to establish protein where I know we're getting that minimum viable amount plus whatever buffer I want. Then I'm looking to bring fat down as low as we can if we're still above about 15% of calories. If you're trying to lose body fat, then I can use all of the rest of that for carbohydrates, which obviously give us more energy, more brain function and mood capacity. Obviously, the environment to keep your metabolism higher longer and make your diet more sustainable. That's a proven fact through research that when you have a higher amount of carbs, you're not binging. So that's it, Kori. That's how I go through a macronutrient profile in my mind.
Awesome. So let's review really fast. Protein, 0.8 grams per kilogram of body weight, but then multiplying it by a factor of 1.5 to up to 3, depending on the person and what they're involved in and what their goals are.
Yep.
And then for fat, 15 to 20, maybe 25, depending on the person, percent of total calories. Mm-hmm. And then we fill in the rest with carbohydrates. Yay!
Simple, right? It's almost magic. but as easy as we want to make that sound, because of everybody wants to rely on some kind of formula.
Yeah.
There is a lot of education, information, and nuance that goes into that. So, we'll talk another time about how to adjust those as you go. But the biggest factor when you're trying to apply those formulas has to rest on a base of your initial calories, because that's where you have to really assess how much food does this person even need to eat. Are they an extreme ectomorph, an extreme endomorph? Where on that energy continuum are they?
Yeah, and I mean, if you're doing this on your own and you just want to know, I think it's a good thing to want to know, how much am I eating? Most of us, if we're not tracking, if we've never done that before and written it down and logged it, we just really don't have any idea. We'll guess and assume incorrectly most of the time.
Yep. And all good topics for us to branch out on, guys. I know we have a lot of this covered in previous podcasts, so don't forget to just dig a little deeper into the archive and search through some of our topics to get more information to pick this one apart a little bit deeper. So thank you guys for always doing that and watching and listening.
Thanks, guys.